Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to be recommending you books based on your personality. I recently saw this video by one of my favourite YouTubers, Hannah Witten, where she was reading books based on her personality type, and she did 2 different personality tests and then looked up book recommendations based on her personality type. And I thought that is such a fun idea, but I didn't 100% agree with all of the recommendations that she was getting. So I thought, why not make my own video and recommend the books that I think are suited perfectly to each of the different personality types. So the personality types that I'm going to be using for this video are the Myers-Briggs, or the 16 different personality types. So my Myers-Briggs personality type is the campaigner, or I'm the ENFP. So if you know anything about these personality types, maybe that's an insight to who I am. But I'm going to go through each of the 16 different possibilities for the personality types, and I'm going to recommend 1 or 2 books for each. Some of them I was having a little more difficulty because they are so opposite to me. So I was finding it difficult to recommend books for these types of people because I was wondering, even if I enjoy that book, would someone of the complete opposite personality still enjoy it? But I still think this is a really fun video, and you can skip throughout the video and find out your own personality type, and also you can take the quiz below. I'm not sponsored or anything, I just think this is a very fun idea, but I'll leave a link to the quiz in the description below so you can find out what your personality type is, and then come back and see if I guessed accurately for a book that you would enjoy. And we're just gonna dive right in. So on the 16 Personalities website, they categorize the personalities into 4 different groups. So I'm gonna go by group. And first up, we're gonna be talking about the Analyst. So the first personality type I want to talk about is INTJ, and this is characterized as the architect. So these people are strategic, they have a plan for everything, and they are very creative thinkers. They are very analytical, they really enjoy learning, but they also enjoy structure, and they're kind of long-range thinkers. They like being able to turn theories into solid plans of action. So for this personality type, I think I've come up with a perfect book that I think these people would really love, and that is The 3-Body Problem. This book is a sci-fi, and it is set during China's Cultural Revolution, and I read this recently and absolutely loved it. The reason I'm recommending this book for this personality type is because it is such a philosophical book, but it's so practically minded as well. This book is all about coming up with these ideas and then pushing them to their very limit. This is a sci-fi book, but it's deeply philosophical, and it's also political. It's so intelligent, and I do think it can be at times really hard work. So it's not a book for everybody, but I do think for this personality type, they would really enjoy digging in and discovering this entire book. So that is my recommendation for the architect. Next up, we have INTP, and this is classified as the logistician. So these people are logical thinkers, but they are also very original and creative. They can be a little bit more individual, and they really value competence and logic, and they can be a little bit more quiet and reserved. So the book that just really stood out to me for the logistician would be Sherlock Holmes, because I feel like maybe Sherlock himself would have been an INTP. Obviously, these are classic mystery stories. There is a lot to uncover in these books, but also the way that Sherlock Holmes works in these stories is very logical. It's very much following a plan, and to the outside it can seem like very out there and original and creative, but to him, he's kind of working through things extremely methodically. So I feel like the INTPs would maybe enjoy Sherlock Holmes. Next up, as part of the Analysts group, we have the ENTP, which is classified as the debater. These people are smart and curious, and they cannot resist an intellectual challenge. So they're very quick and intelligent, and they're often good at a really broad range of things. They can be a little bit argumentative and kind of wanting to one-up people all the time, but they just also get very excited about new ideas and new projects and that kind of thing. They are also more extroverted, they're more assertive, and they kind of really enjoy being very intellectually stimulated all the time. So the book that I chose for the ENTP, the debater, is North and South. This is by Elizabeth Gaskell, and I can't think of a more perfect book for someone who is a debater in their life and enjoys digging into opposing intellectual ideals. So North and South is a classic. It was first published in 1854, and this is a book all about opposing ideals. In this book, you have Margaret Hale, who grew up in the south of England, and then after her family circumstances change, she moves with her father and her mother up to the north of England. There she sees a whole different way of life, and there she also meets a man who is as strong-willed as she, and they begin to constantly butt heads with each other. This book is all about debating values. There is Margaret, who's come from the south and a very comfortable life, and then when she is first faced with the fact of the poverty and the workers and the conditions of the workers up in the north, she is just dismayed that no one is doing anything. It's really about this central clash between the two main characters, and I just think this would be perfect for someone with the debater kind of personality, because this whole book is set up as a dichotomy between the north and the south, the rich and the poor, the factory owners and the workers, and Margaret Hale and the mill owner. Highly recommend this book to everyone, but especially to the debater personality type. So the last one for the analysts is the ENTJ, and that is the commander personality type. So the commander personality type is a bold person, they're imaginative, and they are usually found in positions of leadership. They're very assertive, they're very outspoken, they're very good at public speaking, they're very good at solving problems, and they don't like when things are disorganized or not very efficient. I have two suggestions actually for this personality type. One might seem like a bit of a cop-out, a bit of an obvious choice. That book is War and Peace. I can't think of anything better for a commander to feel like they are in a position of power within reading this book. There is so much about leadership in this novel, and about the duty of leaders, and about how that position can also be so much of an ideal that it's not realistic. I think that commanders would really enjoy the messages inside of this book. Also, it just being about war and peace and then being a commander. This is why I feel like it might be slightly a bit of a cop-out. My other choice also for this personality type was Project Hail Mary. In Project Hail Mary, you have a man who is waking up on a spaceship and he has absolutely no memory of why he's there. He basically has to solve a lot of problems really, really quickly and figure out a way to save the day. And I don't want to give you too many spoilers because this book is such a fun discovery. But I also feel like this book would be really good for this personality type because it is all about problem solving, understanding difficult situations, seeing the best way through, and it's also incredibly imaginative, it being a sci-fi book. It's fun and it's adventurous, and the main character of this book is a leader in his own right. So I feel like for a challenge, War and Peace, and then maybe for fun, Project Hail Mary. There are my two options for this personality type. So next up, let's move over to the diplomats, and this is the group that my personality type is a part of. Some of these were easier for me, but also harder in a way. So the first one I want to talk about is INFJ, which is characterized as the advocate. So people in this personality type are quiet, but they have quite a forceful energy, and they are usually tireless idealists. They have big ideas and they stick to it until it's done. So they usually have very well developed value systems, and they will persevere and always do what they think is the right thing. They were also characterized as a little bit mystical and imaginative. So the book I have chosen for this personality type is The Lord of the Rings. This description just really reminded me so much of The Lord of the Rings, with it all being about this kind of tireless battle to do the right thing. I also feel like fantasy would be the right choice for this personality type, and I feel like they would really enjoy The Lord of the Rings, but specifically I feel like they would enjoy Frodo and Samwise's actual journey throughout The Lord of the Rings, being quite tuned in with the concerns of the people and the fact that they are doing the right thing against everything that would be keeping them safe. So that's my choice for the advocate personality. Next up, we have the INFP, which is the mediator. These people are poetic and kind, and they are always trying to help a good cause. They are also quiet and idealistic, but they are highly interested in serving humanity as a whole. They are more adaptable and they can see many possibilities, and they're usually pretty laid back until something is threatening their value system. But ultimately, they're interested in understanding people and helping people. I actually found it quite difficult to find a book suggestion for this personality type, so I would love any suggestions in the comments. The one that I've ended up choosing is actually Watership Down. So I know that I said that mediators are interested in people, but this book is all about rabbits. Basically, their home is threatened and they have to leave their home to find a new one. This is an adventure story. I would say it has some very dark themes. Although it might seem cute and it's being about rabbits and them like finding a new home, it is about the brutality of nature and being like evicted from your home. I'm recommending this to the mediator type because these types of people are likely to be kind of lost in their own imaginative world, and I feel like that is exactly where this book has sprung from. They're also known to be kind of sentimental and nostalgic, and I feel like that's what this book gives me as well. So that's my suggestion for the mediator type, but very open to other suggestions too. So next up we have the very best personality type possible, and that is my one. It's the campaigner, which is ENFP. So these people are enthusiastic and social. They're often excited by fresh new ideas, and they're very open-minded and flexible with a big broad range of interests. They're able to do stuff but only as long as it interests them. So obviously for the campaigner, being my own personality type, I had to pick from one of my favorite books, but a lot of these are kind of my favorite books, so it was quite difficult to pick. But one that I think is one of my favorite books but has been very hit or miss when I recommend it to other people, I have to pick for this because I feel like if you get it, you get it, and if you're like me, then you'll get it. If you're not, then you won't. And that is This One Sky Day by Leonie Ross. I have this gorgeous edition of this book and I read this last year, absolutely loved it. So this book takes place on the fictional islands of Poppy Show, and every single person born in Poppy Show has a little bit of magic to them, and it's called cause. And this magic can manifest in so many different ways. It can be that you always know what food someone else is craving, that you might know that someone is lying to you, you might just be a really good swimmer. There's like a huge number of like things that this can manifest as, and it's kind of a gift from the gods. This whole book is just an absolute world to explore. There is magic everywhere, there is so much politics going on, there's so many different characters, and you're following them all throughout the course of just one day. This to me is like magical realism at its best. I absolutely loved this book. I thought that it had absolutely everything, every emotion. There's like joy and pain and sadness. Everything is just like full to the brim. That's how I feel reading this book, and I absolutely need to reread it soon because I really just want to dive back into this story. I absolutely loved it. So that is This One Sky Day, and if you're also a campaigner personality type, please read it and let me know what you think. I'll be so interested. So the last personality for the Diplomats group is the protagonist, and this is the ENFJ. So these people are charismatic, they are very inspiring leaders, and they're able to mesmerize their listeners. So they're very popular people. They usually don't like being left alone. They always usually take the human angle. They like seeing things about human connection. They're interested in serving others, and they would often serve others' needs before their own. So obviously this one being called the protagonist, I can think of so many books that have characters just like this, but one that I thought would be enjoyed by people who have this type of personality, another book that I thoroughly enjoyed, and it is The Will of the Many. So this is a fantasy story, and in this world there is such thing as your will, which can be drained away from you, and your will is basically what makes up your strength, your drive, your energy, and it can be drained away from you and given to someone else. So there is a very strict structure and hierarchy in this society. There's people along the bottom that just have to give their will up. There is people at the top who have hundreds of thousands of other people's wills ceded to them. And in this book, you're following a young orphan, and he has a mysterious background, but he is basically hiding from the elite in this city because he does not want to give his will away. He basically gets mixed up with some quite powerful people, and one of them decides to send him to this elite academy where he can train along with all the other elite children. But the person who has sent him to this academy actually has given him a secondary mission, that he has been placed there in order to spy and figure out a mystery that's happening at the academy. This book is so much fun. You are following this character who's extremely focused on his goals and what he wants, but he is being thrown about. There is so much suspense and tension. I was literally like, my heart was racing while I was reading some of these action action scene. And I think for this personality type, it's got a perfect mix of being like very fast paced, but also have that like human connections based magic system that I think would really appeal to the protagonist type. So that's my recommendation for that personality type. Next group of personalities all fall under the Sentinels description. And firstly, we're going to be talking about the ISFJ, which is characterized as the defender personality. So the defenders are very loving and warm, and they are protectors. They can be nurturing, but they're also very dependable to always follow through. They value security, they are very stable and practical people, and they usually have a very rich inner world as well, because they're so perceptive about other people and their observations about the world. So the book that I wanted to recommend for this personality type is Little Women. This is the first book that came into mind when I was thinking about that personality type and what kind of book that they'd be interested in. This is a beautiful book all about the domestic life of these 4 sisters and their mother. And I really love it as a classic novel because it's concerned with the domestic and what's important to women at that time. And there is so much depth in these characters, and there is so much to love. You just feel utterly wrapped up in their life, and you want to protect these little women. Also, do you like my pretty copy? I don't know where I got this. I got this in it's a Reader's Digest version. I actually didn't read this copy, but it does have, I think, some, illustrations, which is very cute and extra cozy. Also a great book to read around this time of year if you're interested, if you've never picked up this book before. If you are this personality type and you've not read this, I would highly, highly recommend Little Women. So next up we have the ISTJ, which is the logistician. And I've just realized I think I've pronounced the logician wrong earlier. ISTJ, the logistician, is practical and very fact-minded, and they can be very quiet and quite serious, but they are concerned with having a very stable life. They might be more of a traditional person, they might enjoy kind of well-developed establishment, but they are usually extremely well-organized people, and they work very methodically towards a defined purpose, and they can basically do any task that they set their mind to. So this description really reminded me of one of my favorite characters that I've ever read from. So the only book that I could recommend for this personality type is The Remains of the Day, because this exactly sounds like Stevens from this book. So this book is set in the summer of 1956, and Stevens is a very well qualified butler in an old house. There's been a lot of big changes in the world in the last few years, and Stevens is kind of struggling to keep up. He's an extremely hard-working individual, and he really prides himself on the traditions that he's maintaining. And basically in this book, he decides to take a little holiday for kind of the first time ever, and you follow him as he kind of encounters the world. I absolutely love this book so much. It's one of my all-time favorites. It made me absolutely weep, and I've never forgotten Stevens as a character. So if you are this personality type and you've not yet read this book, please read it. It's so excellent. But also, everyone just read this book. So next up we have the ESTJ, and that is characterized as the executive. So these people are kind of guardians, and they are incredible at managing things or people. They're not very interested in anything theoretical. They're a very practical person, and they usually have a very clear way of seeing the way that the world should be. They do also usually like to be in charge. So these people like everything to be in good order, and they are very sensible, and then they follow their own judgment always. And personally, I'm not sure that these people would read that much fiction books, but if I'm wrong, then please correct me. But I have 2 suggestions because I'm not entirely sure what this type of person would be into. My first suggestion would actually be Pride and Prejudice. I feel like if you like order and society traditions, then you would really enjoy this book as well. But this book is also really about people who are too much following just what they think is right, when a little flexibility maybe would have been helpful. This is funny and it's intelligent, and I think that just everyone would like this book if they read it, so that's why I'm recommending it for this personality type. And the other book recommendation that I had for this personality would be The Lord of the Flies, which is a book that is all about these boys who get into an accident and they end up marooned on this island, and it's just them, and I think they're about 12 years old, and they basically have to completely fend for themselves. And what they start doing is replicating the society that they know. So they very quickly set themselves up in this way that mirrors our wider society, because they like to have these rules to follow, to know that they're doing the right thing. And I won't spoil anything for you, but it doesn't all go to plan. So I feel like maybe this would be interesting to someone of the executive personality type. Okay, so the last one for the Sentinels is the ESFJ. This personality type is the Consul. So these people are very social, they're very popular, and they're very caring. They're warm-hearted and always really eager to help. They have a strong sense of responsibility and often want to put other people's needs before their own, but they also need quite a lot of external reinforcement to feel good about themselves. So the book that I'm recommending for this personality type is The Lonely Castle in the Mirror. This book is about 7 different children, early teenagers, and for one reason or another they don't want to go to school anymore, and they wake up one day and the mirror in their bedroom is shimmering, and when they touch it they are transported to a lonely castle where a wolf queen roams. And this wolf girl gives them a choice that if they can find this hidden room in the castle, then they'll be granted a wish. This book itself is so warm-hearted, and it is also very typically Japanese in the way that it is approaching these topics. All of these children have a strong sense of their own duty and responsibility, but they're also not fitting into society for one reason or another. They're all pretty down on their luck, and you get to know them and kind of develop their backstories in such a heart-touching way. So I think this book would be perfect for the Consul. So the last 4 personalities we are talking about are the Explorers, and we're starting off with ISTP, and these people are the Virtuosos. So these people are very bold and practical, and they are also very experimental. They can basically do whatever they set their mind to. They're usually more quiet and reserved, and they're really interested in figuring out how things work. But they're also a little bit more of a risk taker. They're not actually as concerned with kind of the rules of society, and they will break them if they have to in order to get something done. But they are essentially just excellent at finding solutions to problems. So the book that I want to recommend to the Virtuoso personality is The Left Hand of Darkness. And I'm actually not even entirely sure why. It's just every time I read the description of this person, this is the book that I was connecting to that. This book in itself is very difficult to describe. It is a piece of speculative fiction. It's a sci-fi book that is set on a different planet. So basically in this book, you are following a man who has been sent to this planet to invite them to basically join the intergalactic UN kind of structure. But this planet is completely different to the one that he calls home. Everyone on this planet doesn't have a fixed sex or gender, and this one kind of biological fact has a huge effect on the entire kind of societal political structure of this planet and how they relate to each other. And basically, as you are following this complete outsider, he has to learn as much as he can about this society in order to reach his goal. And essentially this is a story that boils down to a very inhospitable journey for 2 characters in this book, as they are doing anything they can to try and make the world a better place. This book is incredible. I really want to reread this one again. This has just like lodged its way into my brain and my heart, and I absolutely loved it. So that is my recommendation for the Virtuoso personality type. Next up we have ISFP, which is the Adventurer. And these people are characterized as kind of charming artists, and although they're kind of quiet and maybe a bit more serious, they're always up for trying something new. So they really avoid conflict in any way, and they don't like causing any conflict, and they're not interested in leading or controlling other people. They're very open-minded and flexible people, and usually very original and creative. I feel like I've hit the nail on the head with my recommendation for this personality type, and that is The Song for the Wild Built, and the next book, it is A Prayer for the Crown Shy by Becky Chambers. These books are set in a utopian future world where basically one day the robots or everything mechanical kind of stopped working and revolted against humankind. But you are thousands of years in the future from this, and humankind has evolved into such a much more peaceful way of living in accordance with nature, and you are basically following this tea monk. And at the beginning of the first book, they are very kind of confused about what to do with their life. They enjoy what they do, but it doesn't feel like it's their passion. They're very open to new ideas, just like the adventurer type. They want to make a difference and they're not sure how. And so basically they change their profession and become a tea monk. And then during their job as a tea monk, one day they see a robot come out of the forest and ask the question, what do people need? And this robot and this tea monk start traveling together. These are incredibly cozy books. They're very hopeful. There is not really any conflict in these books, which I feel is suited to this personality type. And they are just like utterly charming, and I really love these books. They're very short, so I'm kind of counting them as one recommendation together. So that's what I'd recommend for the adventurer. Next up we have the ESTP, which is the entrepreneur personality type. These people are smart and energetic, and they like living life on the edge. They're very friendly, they're adaptable, and they're also very action oriented. They're quite like here and now type people, and they're not afraid of taking risks, and they're very loyal to their peers or their friends, the people that they consider in their circle, but they're not necessarily rule followers, and they can kind of like live outside of the law. And so for that reason, the books that I'm recommending to this personality type are Mistborn, the series by Brandon Sanderson, which starts off with The Final Empire. I feel like this series is packed full of entrepreneur type characters. It is an adventure from start to finish. These books are set in a world where basically the Dark Lord won and everybody is oppressed. Ash falls from the sky and the lands are covered in mist, and you are following a young girl, and she gets caught up with a group of people who are basically trying to fight back in any way that they can. And it's kind of essentially a heist novel for the first book. There are these people who are incredibly loyal to each other, but they are living under the radar, and they're doing whatever they can to fight against this very oppressive regime. This series is so excellent. There's actually 3 books in the first part of this series. I've just only got 2 for some reason. It's one of my all-time favorites, and if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it, even if this is not your personality type. It's so much fun. And finally, the last one for the explorers we're talking about is the ESFP, which is the entertainer. Entertainers are spontaneous, enthusiastic, and around them life is never boring. They're very people orientated and fun loving. They often live in the moment, and they love new experiences, and they don't like anything theoretical or impersonal. They can often find themselves at the center of attention as well. And so the book that I want to recommend for this personality type is Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. This is another one of my favorite books, and this description of the entertainer like might confuse you if you've read Piranesi, but I really honestly think that it fits this book so well. In this book, you're following Piranesi, who lives in the house, and this house is made up of countless corridors and vestibules and filled with statues. And he is the only one that lives there, but sometimes the other comes. And so whenever the other visits, Piranesi helps the other with trying to find out the great and beautiful truth of this place. But one day Piranesi finds evidence that maybe someone else is moving throughout the house as well. I don't want to tell you anything more because this book is in itself just a discovery. You are following it through journal entries of Piranesi himself as he is discovering things, and this is one of those books that just absolutely captures your attention from the get-go and doesn't let go. I absolutely love this book. I loved Piranesi himself as a character. He's so close to my heart. He is very much a person who is living in the moment and likes to have fun and is a very people-orientated person despite only interacting with one person. So that is my recommendation for the entertainer. So that, I think, is all 16 personalities with a book, at least one book recommended for each. That was such a fun video to film, and I'm just gonna be so interested if anyone has any comments on my selections. I would love if you don't know your personality type, if you could take the quiz and then see what you think of the book that I've recommended, or do you agree about how I've defined the personalities and the books I've recommended for each personality type? I would just absolutely love to know. Maybe I'll do a part 2 if I hear that lots of people don't agree with my decisions on this one, but I would also love other recommendations in the comments too. And if you enjoyed this video, please remember to like it and subscribe, and you could also turn on the notifications as well for my channel because that really helps me out. That is going to be all from me today. Make sure you go and watch all of my other videos, and I will talk to you again soon. Bye!